Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next YouTube video, and this is going to be my next Transformers comic review, Transformers IDW comics. And this week I'm going to be reviewing the Volume 3 trade for Transformers Robots in Disguise, so the kind of other series that's going on at the same time as Transformers More Than Meets the Eye. And yeah, I'll just get straight into what Volume 3, what it is, basically what's in it. In Volume 3 is issue 10 of Robots in Disguise, the Robots in Disguise annual, and Robots in Disguise issue 11. So as well as that, you have a cover gallery, and like was in the Volume 3 of More Than Meets the Eye trade, you also have some kind of concept sketches from Guido Guidi on the flashback art of the annual. So, you know, cover gallery, kind of sketches, stuff like that. There's not really that much extras. A bit more than kind of usual though, since you do have kind of some script pages, that sort of thing. So, you know, still I wouldn't consider them the best extras, and that's definitely been the biggest flaw of all of these trades of the ongoings. That the extras in them have been pretty poor overall. This is also a 4-issue trade because the annual is 2 issues, so you have 10, 11, and then the annual making up the other 2 issues. So, you know, that's always a bit of a disappointment when there's only 4 issues, so you're kind of paying more. You pay less buying the single issues than you do buying this, and with no extras, there's not really much of an incentive to buy this out of just collecting them. So overall, you know, the trade as a whole, I think, is a bit of a disappointment. Though, if you're buying it in trade, it's fine, I think. But for me, kind of already having the single issues, it's a bit of a disappointment. But now, yeah, I'll show you the single issues. Issue 10 is here, and now issue 10 returned to the Syndromica story. Issue 10 is the part 2 of Syndromica, which is the side story that focuses on Orion Pax. Orion Pax was obviously left at the very start of these kind of stories, and we're kind of returning to him. So this is the second issue covering that. That means that instead of Andrew Griffith on art, you have Livio Ramondelli on art on issue 10. The second one in the trade is the Robots in Disguise annual Primus. Now this is obviously a double sized issue, like the previous More Than Meets the Eye annual, and this one has art by Brendan Cahill, and his art is very nice, which I'll show off when I kind of go through the art and story of them. And this one also has some art by Guido Guidi on the flashback stuff, which, as I explained last week, it's not my favourite art, but it's still pretty cool. And then finally, issue 11, the only issue in this trade that actually kind of covers, that's part of the main like numbered issues of Robots in Disguise, basically. So issue 11 there. Art is by Guido Guidi on this one, actually, not Andrew Griffith. So it's a pretty interesting one in that you have no Andrew Griffith, who's the main artist on Robots in Disguise. No Andrew Griffith in this trade at all, which is interesting. But anyway, let's go back through these issues. I'll bring up issue 10 again. Now, issue 10, as I explained before, is the second part of Syndromica. And the interesting, I suppose, part of this is that they've obviously taken a break of a few issues. So, you know, it's last one was issue 6, this is issue 10, and we pretty much catch up straight back up with Orion Pax where he is. But the interesting, I've said interesting so many times, haven't I? But the good thing about this issue is that it's a bit different than issue 6, because this one is a very complex issue in that it deals with time travel a lot. Just getting straight into it. So stuff, you're flashing all around once you get to this planet, and suddenly you see Orion Pax here, the next panel he'll be over here a few years later, hundreds of years before, hundreds of years after, and you're just flashing back night and day. You see this, the thing that's alive in one scene is now a skeleton in the next scene. It's a really well written comic in the sense that when you understand it, it all works and is like really good. But on the other hand, it is a kind of a difficult one to actually get around to understanding. Like when you read it, it's without kind of help from say a website or something like that. It's a bit hard to kind of just take it in yourself if you're not crazy into Transformers comics. I even had a bit of trouble kind of understanding this, and really didn't get a full grasp on the story until I listened to a podcast. And the podcast is linked in the description below. It's the Underbase podcast, who they basically review pretty much every new Transformer comic that comes out, and they reviewed this issue 10, and they had Chris McFeely on there, and he basically got this issue perfectly, and he said it was one of his favorite issues of comics of Robots in Disguise and stuff like that. So he really liked this issue, and he really helped me to kind of understand what this comic was about in terms of like, oh, so when he flashes to here, he actually flashes to like this point in time, which references like this part of the comic, which references like something else in like other comics and stuff like that. So if you have trouble understanding this comic, check out the podcast in the description. It'll really help you. But it is a good issue, and just to showcase some of the art. You can see here it's Livio Ramondelli. I talked last week about wanting to see maybe some of his art in a more light setting, and we do get that here. You see, there's his the kind of art when it's more dark, you get bludgeon, and it works. There's the atmosphere and stuff like that. But on the other side, we actually get to see some of his art of Transformers in the daytime, and it works. It's perhaps a bit kind of still kind of maybe too dark. He uses maybe too much shadow, even though it's in the daytime. But it actually works in the dark, so I like that. And it's only a few pages, but it's still pretty good. And again, his art really suits this issue. And this issue, in terms of like the story, involves what Shockwave did to the planet, like seeding planets with energon and like various ores of energon, basically caused this planet to, in a way, become like displaced from time. So when you land on the planet, you experience these kind of time flashes and stuff like that. So that's kind of what this issue is about, and it continues to Orion Pax's kind of hunt for Shockwave and Jaxus and all this Bludgeon. Pretty interesting issue, definitely. Then we have the Robots in Disguise annual. Obviously a double length issue. This is 2012 annual, as I mentioned. Different people on art, which I'll just find some pages to show you. There's a lot of the flashback art in this as well, so that's why I was kind of having trouble locating two pages that have just Brendan Cahill's art. So there is roughly Brendan Cahill's art, and I really do like it. It's definitely on a par with Andrew Griffith. Slightly different style, but and he does like some things better, some things not as well as Andrew Griffith. So it's not too big of a change. Then we come back to with the flashbacks in this issue, Guido Guidi on art, and as I've said, I'm really not a fan of this style of art because I think the colours are just all over the place. Too much inking. The line art itself, I think, is fine, but I think they just went too far down the road of trying to make this look retro when they really didn't need to do that. So it just kind of stands out as very odd to me looking through at this issue. Like, look at the complete contrast between these two styles of art. I get one's a flashback and one's meant to be kind of present day, but it's still really kind of jarring to me. The story of the annual is pretty interesting in that in the flashback you basically get explained stuff like Jaxus and Nova Prime, the creation of Monstructor, who you can see here on the cover. You get stuff like Omega Supreme's relationship with Nova Prime and Monstructor, and stuff like that. So some pretty interesting backstory, like really deep backstory on the Transformers in IDW continuity. And then in the present day stuff with like Starscream and all that, the main kind of drive of the story is mainly that they find a Metro Titan underground on Cybertron, and what they do is basically, so when Starscream sees this thing, it kind of awakens the Metro Titan, and the Metro Titan basically says that Starscream is going to be important to the future of Cybertron now. He's like the conqueror. He basically says that Starscream is the one destined to lead the planet, and everyone hears this despite like Prowl trying to keep everyone away. And basically then the Metro Titan kind of teleports away, causing an explosion on the ground, which everyone kind of rushes away from. So that's the main drive of this issue, in that it sets up Starscream as being this important guy because of this destiny that the Metro Titan kind of granted upon him. And this puts him really high in the standings, with the election coming up. Bumblebee, Prowl are not happy about this. Metalhawk is friends with Starscream and is probably more concerned about this than like happy or sad about it. He's just kind of like, what's happening here? Why did Metro Titan choose Starscream of all people, that sort of way? And it's kind of, I suppose, interesting. It's definitely an interesting like issue overall. It's told from the perspective of Metalhawk, and it's just about him kind of like trying to deal with all this sort of stuff, and that like he's needed here just as much as everyone else. But I think the ultimate kind of thing coming out of this is definitely the importance of Starscream into the plot, and as you go into issue 11, it kind of makes this annual very important, because issue 11 opens up with but before I get into that, I'll actually showcase the art. Guido Guidi not doing flashback art here, but instead doing like a Robots in Disguise art. So there it is, and I really like his take on it. And I actually say I prefer Guido Guidi's art to Andrew Griffith's, because I think he gets the faces a bit better, Guido Guidi, than Andrew Griffith, and his attempts at the bodies and stuff like that maybe a bit more in proportion, that sort of thing. So I really do like Guido Guidi's art on this, and he fills in really well on issue 11. The story of this obviously picks up with Starscream very happy about hearing what the Metro Titan said about him, and like he's already basically crowning himself Lord of the planet, basically. But all this changes when Omega Supreme is basically blown up. Everyone starts to blame the Decepticons, and because Starscream is still a Decepticon, he has the insignia and stuff like that, he's basically blamed, and instantly the success he had kind of is gone. And so he kind of like teams up with Prowl to basically take out the other Decepticons and make it appear that he had no involvement in it, and that the Autobots had no involvement in it and stuff like that. And there's lots of stuff going on in the background. RC's on the cover for a reason. She does some very big things at the end of this issue, and I think one of the best endorsements I suppose I can give issue 11 is that for me, a lot of the earlier episodes before this of Robots in Disguise were very kind of, they all blended in together almost. That like if you said to me like, outside of the Syndromica issues, which are 6 and 10, what happens in say issue 3 or 4, I probably wouldn't off the top of my head be able to tell you like what exactly happens in those issues. Though if you ask, because I just consider like, oh, that's just the kind of middle part of the overall story. So that's kind of been one of my issues with Robots in Disguise, and that single issues haven't really had something in them to make them like really work well on their own and like make each issue kind of a satisfying read by itself. But with issue 11, it has moments like, as I said, the instant payoff of like the first few pages, Starscream going to be the leader, having the crown, to instantly down to like 0. Then you have the Prowl stuff, then you have the RC stuff with the Decepticons at the end, and then huge reveal at the end of this issue, huge cliffhanger ending to this that's going to change everything going forward. And that's why I like issue 11 so much, and why I think it's one of the better issues of Robots in Disguise. And I think it's a good way to end issue 11, and also a good way to end this trade, in that it's such a big cliffhanger that it works. It also works that the cliffhanger of the whole trade is actually that final page from issue 11. Sets up volume 4 really well as the next issue as well. So It's very impressed with issue 11, but kind of coming back to, I suppose, the trade overall. As I said, it's a weird one to break down because, again, as I said, there's no Andrew Griffith on art in any of the issues in this, so he doesn't do any of the art in this whole trade. Um, so that's an interesting one. I was just checking the cover art. The cover art's actually by Brendan Cahill, so that's interesting. I was wondering if they maybe had Andrew Griffith do the cover of it, but no. So he's not involved in any of the art on this. The only issue of the main Robots in Disguise story that we get really is issue 11, though the annual kind of explores that as well. The annual, I would say, is actually pretty important. It does fit in between issues 9 and 11. Obviously, issue 10 being the other story, so it doesn't kind of really count. Basically, the annual happens after 10. No, the annual happens after 9, issue 9 of Robots in Disguise. So that works. And then obviously issue 10 being in there, it's just it's a bit random, but that's the way they kind of planned out the series. That issue 6 was going to be kind of the first part of the Orion Pack story, and then issue 10 was going to be the next one. And then I think like issue 17, 18, or 19 is going to be the next Syndromica story. So it doesn't maybe make for the best kind of trades looking at them as a whole, but I think issue 11 worked enough that it made for a good ending to this trade. So volume 3 very solid, and if you haven't read it, I think the trade is definitely the way to go. But yes, thank you for watching this review. Volume 4 of both books, Robots in Disguise and More Than Meets the Eye, is not yet out yet, so I probably will put out another Transformers comic review of a different comic next week, and then see what the release dates are like for the other ones. So yeah, expect a different comic this week. It should be kind of more of a standalone one as opposed to like part 1 or 2 of something. So that should be fun next week. So, but yep, thank you for watching this review, and bye.